What's cheaper for welding? Stick welding or MIG? Today I went to buy gas for the MIG and I ran into a follower who asked me why I spend so much money buying gas for the MIG instead of buying stick electrodes, which are much cheaper. But is MIG really more expensive? In welding or metalworking, there are two popular methods: stick welding, which uses the MMA machine, and MIG-MAG SMAU. Both are effective, but really, which one is more economical in the long run? In this video, we're going to look at the differences to find out which is more cost-effective. Well, let's start with the prices of the machines. Just so you know, I'm going to give all the prices in dollars. Here, the dollar is worth 1,000 pesos here. Depending on which country you're from, you need to know how much the dollar is worth. A good stick welder, more or less, can be found for around $250 to $400. So here we're going to put 250 or 400. Remember that this is in dollars. We can get a complete MIG-MAG machine ready to weld for $1,000. So this point goes to the MMA because it's more affordable and more accessible. So we're going to give it a green check mark. And this one gets a cross. Now let's talk about the prices of consumables. What does consumable mean? It's something that gets used up. For example, in MMA, we have the electrodes that we use in the machine and they get used up. In MIG-MAG, we're going to use the wire, which will be used up every time we're welding. Now I'm going to tell you the prices. A really good electrode that doesn't let you down costs $7 per kilo. And for MIG-MAG, 5 kilos of copper-coated wire costs $35. But there's another problem with MIG-MAG. Not only do we have to buy the copper-coated wire, but we also have to buy the gas. The gas cost me $6. So here we're going to put a little bar and $6. Let's go. The gas I use is CO2, which is the cheapest. It costs me $6 and it lasts for 5 kilos of wire. Many will ask me, Gabucha Lopez, why don't you use Atal gas? It gives a better finish and a beautiful bead. But what's the problem? It's much more expensive. However, with CO2, it's more affordable and I get almost the same results. Well, then we have the MIG-MAG consumables. We know that between the wire and the gas, it's going to be $41. So here we put down 41. In this case, it seems like MIG-MAG is expensive, but is it really expensive? Because we still don't know. We know that a kilo of electrodes costs $7. But how many electrodes are in a kilo? Here I have a kilo of electrodes. I'm going to put it on the scale so you can see that there's a kilo of electrodes. In this kilo of electrodes, there are 47 electrodes, but how much waste is there? How much does a single electrode weigh? A single electrode weighs 21 grams. So we would have to subtract the part back here, which is not used, and the coating, which comes apart and disintegrates when we weld. Here I remove the little part that would be left when the electrode is finished, and now I'm going to remove all the coating to find out how much the electrode actually weighs. And this is how the bare electrode looks. How much does the core of the electrode actually weigh? It weighs 13 grams. It weighs almost half of what the complete electrode weighed. In 1 kilo of electrodes, there are 47 electrodes. What actually gets used for welding is 13 grams. So 47 times 13 is 611 grams. So in terms of loss, we have almost 400 grams of loss from a 1 kilo electrode. Well, in 1 kilo of electrode, we know that 611 grams are used. So how many kilos of electrodes do we have to buy to end up with the same 5 kilos? So since we know that 611 grams are used out of each kilo, let's multiply 611 by the 8 kilos of electrodes we're going to buy. And that's 4,800 grams. So from 8 kilos, we're going to get almost 5 kilos to use. We're going to put in 488 grams. So according to the tests and calculations we did, we have to buy 8 kilos of electrodes to make almost 5 kilos of usable electrode. So we have to do 8 kilos times $7, which was the price per kilo. In total, that would be $56. So we know that to get almost 5 kilos of usable electrodes, we have to spend $56, which would be 8 kilos of electrodes. And we all think that MIG welding is much more expensive because we have to buy the copper-coated wire and the gas. But in the long run, stick welding or MMA is much more expensive. Many of us think that because we buy electrodes in small quantities like 10 units or 1 kilo, we think it's much cheaper. But in the long run, it becomes more expensive. So this point goes to MIG welding because it turns out to be more economical in the long run. Effectiveness and speed. With stick welding, it takes a little longer because once the electrode runs out, we have to change the electrode and start welding again. However, with MIG welding, we can weld continuously without stopping. So this point goes to MIG welding. By welding continuously and not having to stop to change electrodes, with MIG welding, we can do many more projects in less time. In summary, which welding machine should you choose? That's a matter of preference because anyone can like any of them, or it could be because of your budget. At that moment, the MMA stick welding machine might be more accessible since it's a bit more affordable. But in the long run, it's much more expensive. However, the other one might cost a little more, but in the long run, it's much cheaper. So which one do you prefer? Let me know down below in the comments. If you prefer the MMA, why? And if it's the other one, why? If you enjoyed this video, please follow me. It really helps. Thanks.